In my Jesus keeps.
We've got 9 o'clock here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and across the rest of the Eastern Caribbean.
To die.
It's now time for us to present to you this evening's Full and Abundant Life radio program hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. And before I go further, it's been a while since I haven't heard this song. So I made sure I got the program started just a little bit early so I can get peace.
All of my time.
Ain't got time to die. Without further let me turn you over to Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome.
It is certainly a privilege to be here tonight again, and it's welcome. Come on, you're doing an excellent job. So tonight, at least, we're starting on time.
Yes.
So yes, I love it. It's awesome. So, but I want to say welcome to all of our listeners there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines tonight. And I know this is a very festive period. I think 9 morning may have already started. I'm not counting the numbers yet, but I think it may have started. Right.
We did the launch, and I think it started on the 16th. I think.
Okay, all right. So you'll be out on the street, I guess, right?
Not me.
Huh?
Not me. Too early.
Okay. I mean, I know a lot of West Indians, Vincentians.
A lot of folks are gonna be out, especially the first morning.
Right.
It's often jam packed.
I know. Everybody's on their planes. They already landed in SVG, coming from England and Canada and United States and all over the place. So
I guess you got stopped.
Right. So, but I've never really attended. But maybe one of these days I might have the courage to actually attend. So I have to see. But anyway, for tonight, I certainly want to welcome all of you who are part of the program. Let me remind you again, this is certainly an interactive program. And so I think we can improve the quality of it if we have your participation. I do receive from time to time some emails. And of course, usually the emails, it's when I say something wrong or have done something wrong. And I usually get some email on that. But I'd really like for you to participate in an active way. Share your thoughts and ideas. This is a forum that we can sort of have dialogue and interact together. And so there are 3 different numbers that you can use tonight. One is 457-9997, and that's one of the local radio station, local number there in WFM in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And if you're outside of St. Vincent and you're calling in from one of the Caribbean islands, certainly you would have to use the area code, which is 784. Another local number that they have, it's the 532-9997. And I think that might be the WFM number. The first one, the 457-9997, that might be the flow number. But there's also a WhatsApp number that you can use to send text. And I'm not sure about the voice portion of that, but you can try. And that number is 784-457-9994. So those are the 3 ways that you can interact with us here tonight. And of course, for those of you who do join the Facebook link, you can also interact there at the Facebook. I'll try to monitor that. But there are other people who will check in there at the Facebook, and certainly you all can interact with each other and share your thoughts there. And I will try to monitor that as well. Also, I think we also reach out also on YouTube as well. So I guess if you plug in Dr. Claudius Davis, you'll be able to get the feed there on the YouTube as well. So again, welcome. It's certainly a privilege to have all of you tonight. Now, there's been much happening, I think, both here in the United States and also in SVG and St. Vincent as well, in terms of, the continued discussion about violence, continued discussion about our children, some of the graphic kinds of situation, the escalation of rage and anger, and a lot of what's happening that people are discouraged about and are talking about. But for tonight, I want for us to focus. We've been sort of continuing that, looking at different topics. But primarily tonight, I want for us to focus on mental health, mental illness within families, and how families are really affected by mental illness. And I think it's something that we tend to sweep under the rug, and we don't really pay much attention to it. Certainly, we really don't allocate a lot of monies when it comes to mental health. And that's not only true here in the United States, because I work in mental health. So I know that legislators and politicians don't tend to make mental health a priority. So I would also suspect that the same thing might be true in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that there's not a whole lot of monies allocated for mental illness. And but I also think maybe part of the culture of it too might encourage politicians not to devote a lot of money in that area, simply because people tend to not utilize or to acknowledge mental illness as a serious problem. And so because we're in this phase of denial, we really don't pay much attention to it. And as a result of that kind of a headset, the mental health discussion really don't make it to the top of the list in terms of what's a priority for our politicians and our legislators. As a matter of fact, here in the United States, the first place they normally cut is in the areas of mental health. Even in New York State, as a matter of fact, most of the mental health clinics that were, in essence, run by the county are closing. And they are sort of, pushing them off to independent operators who are just, motivated primarily by money. And so we notice that what I'm saying is that we really don't pay much attention to mental health or mental illnesses. However, it is an outstanding issue. It's creating a lot of impact on our communities. It impacts our safety, and it's even, I was looking at a video on one of the local radio stations this morning in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I was really, I sat back and I looked at that and I said, wow, it's amazing, because I've been in a lot of training. I've witnessed a lot of training of law enforcement officers, and usually the training goes something like this: always try to de-escalate, try to talk people down. And obviously, if it goes beyond that and that's not successful, then what you do is you try to control them, and you physically control them. And usually that's when I think a lot of people get hurt, because in order to control you, obviously they have to put you on the ground. And usually you may get bruises in your face, your arm may be sprained or broken and stuff like that. But the whole idea is that they hold you and they try to put you on the ground so that they can control you, maybe put a handcuff on and stuff like that. But I noticed in St. Vincent, they approach a police officer just stand and just slap them off and box them off. And I'm like, wow, that is quite amazing. That kind of a culture. As a matter of fact, I know people don't like when you use the word culture, especially when it has to do with SVG. But obviously, when you look at how training is being done, when you look at how police officers try to control issues, and then especially the video that I looked at this morning, I said, that's one brother that has a real poor impulse issue, So I can only imagine that behavior that I saw is obviously a behavior that probably goes on at home as well. When his girlfriend or his wife, get on his nerve, he probably slap and box them down just as quickly. So it is, and that's why you may say, well, why am I even talking about that? But I really want to talk about, this huge denial about mental health, because sometimes, and I said today, as a matter of fact, I said to one of my patients today, I was talking about a situation, and I said, it's interesting that a person with mental health issues, with fairly, good cognitive skills, they're fairly intelligent, could actually work their way up to becoming a judge, to becoming a politician, to becoming a person with real power, but a person with real severe mental illness. And when I say mental illness, I'm talking things like, poor impulse control, lots of rage and anger, or a person who don't have any conscience whatsoever. And those are the people sometimes are fairly successful in working their way into really high positions with power and control. And sometimes police officers, people who are given that title, sometimes are seriously ill people. But I guess in other countries such as the United States and places like that, we have mechanism to attempt to weed out, those people who are struggling with serious mental health issues. But I would suspect that in the smaller islands that they may not be quite as savvy in terms of having the mechanism in place to really weed out those people who are suffering with serious impulse control problems, antisocial kinds of personalities, no conscience kinds of people who may wind up with wearing a gun in a uniform. And those people can be very deadly. And these are the kinds of people who wouldn't mind slapping you upside the head, because they're just that out of control. And so when you have a person like that in power or with a weapon, then that's the kind of person you want to say, yes, sir, I'm so sorry, and you apologize. You have to learn how to adapt if you're going to stay alive, and it's it was interesting when we saw the situation that generated the Black Pride, when the police officer put his knee and eventually the gentleman lost his life. And I thought about how African Americans throughout the world thought that was just over the top, that was just so horrible. And what I saw this morning when a police officer slapping up this woman, boxing up this woman, I thought, wow, how is this possible? How is this, but that's the one, but nobody, and it was interesting, there was not really much done in terms of, even the other, law enforcement people who probably were present should have really aggressively, bring that brother down. But obviously, sometimes it is, and again, the word culture may not be very, I don't think folks like when they hear that word culture, so I'll refrain from using that. I'll just say I want to kind of take our discussion down the road in terms of looking at mental health issues, because I think it is showing up in every aspect of our society. I think it is showing up in our churches, in priesthood, people who are given, high position of being a priest or being a pastor or being a bishop or being an evangelist. So we see this not just in the area of the police officers, but we see it in the area of within the church religious community as well. That this is a real serious problem, that people do have severe imbalances, severe personality disorders, that especially narcissistic personality disorders, where people, if they feel disrespected in any way, you didn't give them the kind of respect that they needed, they'll slap you down, and they'll well, not in the United States. A police officer cannot slap another person down. I'm talking about St. Vincent and in some of those other places. Police officers have that ultimate power that they can just slap you down when they want, and nobody can touch them. They're invincible, they're untouchable. But I want us to understand that level of behavior may be indicative of an emotional psychiatric problem that people have. And this is not just, in a small area. I'm saying even within the Christian communities as well, that there are men and women who are struggling with serious problems. And I think, we need to be able to develop mechanism by way of being able to screen out some of these kinds of things, because these are the people that we do need. The police officers, they create an environment of safety for each of us. We can't live without them, and we can go to sleep at nights because we know that they are out there looking out for us. So there are wonderful police officers. There are wonderful people within religious organization, priests and evangelists and pastors and bishops and teachers and principals within our school system. I mean, they are just awesome, wonderful people. There are great people within our government in terms of our ministers who spend night and day trying to look out for our best interest. So those people are there. But once in a while, you may find someone who shouldn't be there that actually finds themselves in positions with power that really shouldn't be there. And so that's kind of where I wanted to have our discussion tonight, and to sort of have an open discussion. You know, not everything that I say you're going to be agree with, but it is a forum that you can have just an open discussion and really talks about that. And tonight in particular, you know, families that are affected by mental illness, I think are among the most vulnerable people in our communities. And like I said up front, that, you know, there's not a whole lot of money that's been allocated to mental health. So even those mental health professionals that may be in St. Vincent, because of they have to survive, you know, their services may be at a place where the ordinary poor individual can't reach them, because, you know, people have to pay their rent, they have to pay their mortgages, they have to do all of these things, they have to pay for office space and all of that. And so a lot of mental illness people may not have the financial resources to be able to access good quality mental health care. And so what happens is that the government then have to step in, but then they don't have a lot of resources either. And sometimes, you know, there are other priorities that take center stage. And so, and even within the church community, as a matter of fact, I think the churches, when you talk about denial, I think the churches are some of the biggest culprits, I think, that shroud themselves in denial. And their motto is, let's not talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, it means it doesn't exist. But I believe that mental health illnesses exist just about in every community. And shockingly enough, even within some of our pulpits, where some of our local ministers and preachers and priests are really people who are very sick individuals that should not be given, but it happens. And so that's kind of where I want us to really have our discussions here tonight. I hope that, you know, I hope as we have our discussions that there be no name callings or anything like that, but just share, you know, what your thoughts are in terms of what you feel, you know, about mental health illness and the impact that it is happening to our families. I mean, such families are more likely to experience social isolation, financial hardship, marital discord, with an increased risk for children, and especially, you know, issues such as psychological and environmental, and even to a certain extent, their genetic factors that will in fact, you know, happen and impact our children down the road. And so, you know, we have kids who are struggling with learning disabilities, kids that are struggling with autism, kids that are on the spectrum level, and most of those illnesses are basically genetic, and not just all of it being genetic, but also that there are neurological illnesses that our children go through. And so if we don't really allocate, you know, the financial resources to be able to catch these children at an early stage and be able to put in place remedial programs of all kinds, not just academical programs, but also, you know, mental health kinds of programs to be able to help these youngsters to at least develop a way of coping that might make them more successful as they enter into adulthood. But if we neglect them, and this is quite often what we do, we neglect these children. And then, of course, they show up. They show up in our criminal court system. They show up in our family court system. they show up in our educational system, and then they show up in our homes, breaking in. So we see it. It's there. It is something that we can't get away from. Even though we try to deny it, we act as though it doesn't exist, yet it is having a tremendous impact on our way of life and how we live. And so we have to begin to come together as a community and begin not just to be critical and finger pointing, but rather to come together as a community and then see how we can develop strategies and plans and supportive programs that might be able to help those families that are struggling with mental illnesses. So those are some of the basic things that I think that are important tonight. I certainly want to welcome Nicole Samuel, Nicolette, sorry, and Hyacinth. It's certainly a privilege to have you here with us. And I know Hyacinth is a person who is a very outspoken person, and she, I'm sure that she has some thoughts about this. We certainly would love to hear, what are your ideas? What are your thoughts on mental illness and how mental illness is in fact affecting our families? So let me just highlight some areas, like some bullet points, I think, that I sort of put together that we can, when we think of mental illness and how the wide range of psychiatric symptoms that seem to persist and have really negative impact on our families. And so if we put them together, for example, a functional disability in terms of living skills, where people are so impacted psychiatrically that they can't maintain jobs, they can't maintain employment, they're not reliable, they're not dependable. And so if they're not, then eventually they become unemployable. And when that happens, certainly it creates a problem, especially if it's a single mother. You can see how it would have, if she can't hold a job, if she's unemployable because of her mental illness that she's struggling with. And so you can see how that will have a tremendous impact on the children that rely on that mother to provide them a safe space, to provide them nurturing, to provide food, and all the necessary things that children do need in order to grow and to develop, a healthy lifestyle. So that's one. The other issue is, I think, that we see with mental illness is that social interactions. It limits people's ability in terms of interacting with their peers, interacting within their communities. And again, I think this is where I think the church should go beyond just, their Sunday morning experience to provide, holistic remedial program, not just from the pulpit, but in order to provide services to families that may be impacted by mental illnesses. And there are local churches that provide wonderful work in terms of remedial work. I know that, in St. Vincent, there's one of the pastors there that I do listen to fairly at mornings, and does a wonderful job. And they seem to have a wonderful program right there in Kingston in terms of, the kind of mental health kinds of supportive programs that they provide to their members. And I'm hoping that, it may have, gone beyond just their members, but also to others as well. I think mental illness has a way of impacting family relations. Because and again, because of the denial system, family members don't want to be identified with another family member who may be struggling with schizophrenia, who may be struggling with serious mental illness. People don't want to be identified with that. So eventually they're going to begin to isolate that family, isolate that particular brother, that particular sister, whoever that is that has this severe mental illness. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, because of the social interaction, it impacts on a person's ability to maintain their job, and then it may also impact their ability, the educational ability, because if you're so psychiatrically impaired, certainly, and it depends on how early, as a matter of fact, things such as schizophrenia usually we try to, well, at least I do, I try to refrain from diagnosing a person, until when they get into their maybe 18, 19, onwards, before I start dropping that label down on individuals. But those people usually, maybe by the first year in college, by the first year, the middle of the semester, that's when this thing really hits sometimes based on their age. And then eventually they drop out. And that's the end of them, because once they drop out of that because of an early onset of some psychotic disorder, whether it be schizophrenia, whatever it is, or bipolar disorder, a real severe bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, eventually that young person at 18, 19, maybe their first year in college, eventually the first breakdown might happen then. And then what happens? They go into a psychiatric facility, and that's the end of their education, and their whole life becomes destroyed, because of the stigma of mental illness in the first place, that the family certainly aren't going to keep it on the covers, so to speak. So because of all those stigmas attached to it, a young person at the age of 19 or 18 coming on with their first breakdown in terms of whether it be schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever it is, and that usually happens, well, in this country, in the United States, usually happens about the first year in college or so, given the age. I'm not sure what the situation is in St. Vincent. I'm not even sure if there's any data there to really, that's really being monitored. And I'm hoping that, some of you there in St. Vincent, especially if you've been a retired teacher, might be able to may have more information about this that you really can share with us. And so, again, this is an interactive program, and I certainly would like for you to share and to interact with us here tonight. So, and then the other thing that and I see this a lot, especially, I think teachers probably experience this a lot, especially, going from the middle school, maybe just between the second year in the middle school to, like, say, the first year in high school. I mean, you see this a lot, and it gets worse. And that's why here in this country, most kids with this will probably drop out in the 9th grade. And the only reason that they drop out in the 9th grade is because you do it in the 6th and the 7th. We go and get mom and dad, or we threaten to put them in jail. So you can't really drop out of school because it's the responsibility of the parents. But you start getting to that age in the 9th grade, obviously you're free. The school would allow you to quit and don't come and drop out if you want to. Okay, but prior to that, you really can't, because then it's the parent responsibility with the lower ages. So, but poor impulse control, and I'm sure teachers, you've been a teacher, you've recognized this, and this is where these kids get suspended. They become bullied in school. They get into a lot of verbal and physical altercation all the time, because they simply can't control. And you look at them wrongly, and they decide to knock you up the head. And I think that's what I saw. Some of the police officers struggle with this. I mean, if they think you disrespect them and don't cow down to them, they'll slap you upside the head. Not in the United States, of course. You can't get away with that up here. Actually, they have more sophisticated way. They don't just slap you. They probably use their gun and do something else. They have different other ways of doing that. But it seems like in St. Vincent, maybe the slapping is a lot much milder than actually shooting. They're probably doing the States. So I don't want to put them up there. I'm just trying to put some little humor in this. But actually, that poor poor impulse control lend itself. We see it in the high school, we see it in the middle school with youngsters who can control, and eventually they wind up being suspended, expelled. And in some school, the kids they go to the extreme of actually expelling them, period, because their behavior is so far out. And let me tell you, I know a youngster like this who essentially was very brilliant, very bright young guy, very bright. And so he was expelled because of his behavior. I mean, he would, as a matter of fact, he was expelled because he actually knocked the principal out, one day in the office. And of course, he was expelled. But he was able, because he was so bright. So he was homeschooled, tutored, basically at home. And so he was able to, get his degree and finish up and everything. And he went into the military. And the military, of course, he was because he's that kind of a guy. So he learned to shoot and he learned to do all those wonderful things, and he served his time there. And he was a Marine, actually. And that's a big giveaway. It's a big giveaway. You ever notice most of the special ed kids, they always want to go into the Marines because that's where the guns are. That's where you kill people. So the special eds always wanted to go. But anyway, so he wound up there, and obviously he came back. And usually in this country, if you are in the military, then you sort of get first preference in terms of getting into the police force or in law enforcement. And obviously, that's what happened. But here's, you got to remember something. In the military, you are actually trained to shoot first and ask questions later. That's how you train in the military. So if you spend 4 years in the war, so between 1992, in that period, in terms of Iraq and Afghanistan and those kinds of places, where you're being trained there, if you're going to live, if you're going to survive, you have to learn to shoot first and ask questions later. So that's your headset. That's a schema. That's how you survive. Now you're back in the United States and you're given priority because you were in the military. You ever notice in the military, when you get at the airport, you start to get on a flight, they always say that the military people first have first choice to board the flight. So that is essentially what the law enforcement people do here. If you've been in the military and you have an honorable discharge, you get head of the line to become a police officer. So you become a police officer. Now, in a police officer, when they train you to be a police officer here, you ask questions first and you shoot later. You see the reverse? In the military, you shoot first and you ask questions later. In the police department, you're trained to ask questions first and you shoot. However, understand this, that training, after 4 years of that training, the philosophy of asking questions first and shoot later becomes automatic because you survive. You become very good at it. You don't have to think about it. It happens automatically. Someone shows up, you're on a battlefield, and automatically your finger goes to the trigger and you start shooting because that's the way, it's an automatic process. So when now you're in the police force now with a different headset, you were trained that way. Guess what happens when that person is in a real crisis? And that template, the military template is the one's going to come to the top. When in crisis, it's the military. Because remember, police officers, generally, a crisis doesn't really pop up quite as often, right? So what happens is, in a crisis, that template kicks in. And then the police officer is going to do what he was trained to do. And that is shoot first and ask question later. You remember what? There was a case once here where there was like 40-something bullets. It went into a young man that didn't even have a weapon on him. Think about it, 45 bullets being fired off, okay? Because the headset is a little different. What I'm saying to us is that whatever that template is, so if you have a police officer who has that kind of a template, or it may simply be poor impulse control, or it may simply be low self-esteem, because people who with low self-esteem, with a narcissistic personality disorder, don't take kindly to disrespect. Okay, you disrespect a person like that, you're going to trigger everything in them, and once that's triggered, you're going to get whatever they have. And if it's a fist, you're going to get it. And if it's a man, it's going to be a fist. And if it's a woman, it may be an open slap. But sometimes some of these guys are so dysfunctional that they would open their palm to slap another grown man because of the shaming process. But really, the shame that they're trying to cause in the other person, it's the shame that they have within themselves, that every day of their life, they're living with shame in themselves. So any slight disrespect or anything that they may perceive that attacks them or their personality or who they are, believe me, they're going to empty everything that they have in them, all of the rage, all of the anger that they have. And it doesn't matter whether they have a badge, doesn't matter whether they're in a uniform, and it doesn't matter where they are, because this same behavior will happen when their wife or their girlfriend triggers it. When the girlfriend triggers that, they're going to get the same shame and the shame anger and the shame, and they're either going to wind up in the hospital, broken leg. But sometimes these women are so afraid that they're probably going to call in sick until the black eye go down, because they don't want people to know, because they would only wind up being killed or being beaten. That's why people become silent. But what I'm saying to us is, we have to begin to see that all of this has to do with mental illness. And sometimes we see mental illness not on those milder forms of it that are just as deadly and dangerous. We try to see like people's hearing voices, they're talking to themselves, and that's it. But what about the person with a low self-esteem, person with a narcissistic personality disorder, the person with a borderline personality disorder that have rage and anger? They're time bomb waiting. These are the kinds of people you don't want to honk your horns, and tell them to go. You don't want to hit them their bumper or scratch their cars. You don't want to slow them down. They run you down, cut you off, pull you out of their car, and beat you down. Doesn't matter. And obviously, if it's a police officer, he can do it and get away with it, because he can write and say, whatever you've done. But these are people that are deadly. And so we've got to begin to pay more attention to our children, because some of us are too old to change. But I believe that if we can begin to develop programs for our middle schools, programs for our elementary schools, it'd be interesting to have the police officer that I saw this morning and the video system, have him go into an elementary school to teach children how to respect each other and how not to resort to violence, and how to learn how to control their impulse. I think that should be his punishment, actually. His punishment should be to get him to spend the next 3 months in a middle school teaching middle school kids how to control their anger and demonstrate to them how they should be kind and how they should try to escalate violence and do mediation, conflict mediation. Have him go as part of the punishment. And maybe he might learn something. Maybe he'll turn out to be a wonderful police officer and become to one of the, of course, I only see a clipping. There may be a whole lot to this thing that I might be missing. But I'm just saying to us is that we need to begin to look at how we're raising our children, what sort of examples we're sending to our children, and understand that mental health situation, liabilities and vulnerabilities are not just with those people who we have already locked away in psychiatric facilities, but they may be our husbands, they may be our wives, they may be our priests, they may be our evangelists and our pastors and our ministers and our deacons and our elders and our brothers and our sisters and our grandmothers. These are people that we live with, because mental illness is not an isolated situation. There are mild forms of it. There are all different kinds of it. One of the reasons that we have so much brutality and the killing that is happening globally around our world, it's because people are having serious emotional problems, and it become a way of life. That's how they resolve conflict. And so they use force to do that. But usually it's about something inside of themselves. And I think the Bible kind of outlined that for us. James clearly says in James chapter 4, what's the cause of violence and rage and killing and murder among you? It says it's from within yourself. It's your own lust and your own desires. That's the basis of all of that. And so all of this conflict that we're having, this ugliness and this killing and this slapping up and boxing up and all of that really has to do with something within ourselves, what's happening within us, and so it becomes a problem. So we have poor impulse control, low self-esteem. And for me, the one that I think it's really dangerous, and it's dangerous in the sense that these people are very highly functional people, like narcissistic personality disorders. These people are very highly functional people, but they're very self-centered people, and they're very vulnerable people. It wouldn't take very much for them to utilize their power to destroy another human being, because they are so sick inside. They're so vulnerable inside. It wouldn't take much. They don't let anything go. They can't let anything go. They have to make sure that there's a penalty for everything that they think that someone is doing towards them or is thinking about them. And of course, we talked a little bit about the personality disorder person. And of course, that's like the love and hate relationship. I love you 1 minute and I want to kill you the next minute. And not just an ideation, not just a thought that you have. This is something that they're going to act out, and they're going to call you out. As a matter of fact, one of my patients today was telling me that she just broke up with a boyfriend. So I said, well, why did you break up with him? Well, he came to visit me. Well, I said, that's a good thing. What's wrong with? I mean, he was calling this lady all kinds of adjectives that I can't use here, but all kinds of adjectives. And she said, look, I am tired of it. And get to find out, she lives in a very violent domestic kind of a situation. He beats her just about every other day. And guess who is the main financial breadwinner in that family? She is. It's her home. It's her everything. But yet she's the one that gets beat every night. So there's a sickness that's going on. And many of our women are the victims of that. And too many of us are too silent about this. And we need to begin to speak up. Not that we have to become, violent and get out of control, but we need to be able to say enough is enough. This is not right. And I think the churches should really be in the front run of this, because they're the ones who are marketing, a way of life that is built on kindness and forgiveness and love and respect for each other. And they're the ones that should really be modeling this, throughout our community, and be able to provide and develop mentoring programs that would be for the age group, for the middle school, and for our elementary schools. Because by the time you get to high school, kind of like kids are so busy trying to get to college, and so you don't have time for all of this stuff. But I think if we start with the elementary school and our middle school, in terms of helping these children, in terms of peer mediation, how to resolve conflict, how to de-escalate conflict, and then eventually by these youngsters, by the time they come back from college, get into our police force, and get into government, these are the people that will be able to bring some sort of common sense and the way we certainly treat each other. So that to me is really what I think that needs to be done. So also some of the other issues that we can, and of course I'm just doing this because I'm hoping that we can have more of an interactive situation here, and I'm still waiting for this. You have the numbers that you can call and share with us, but also obsessive compulsive disorders, OCD. I mean, that's a serious problem. Like I said, I've had patients who can't even enjoy their own homes. They can't even go into their basement because of what has happened. And one lady, she was sharing with me that, the reason she can't really take advantage of her basement, beautiful home, because as a child, she was raped in her basement. And because she was raped in the basement, here is a woman who is a grown person with a business, fairly successful, and can't go into her own basement. She's crippled, and she's stuck in a home and she, I kept saying to her, come on, no one can be that sick. I mean, she has like a string. I'm OCD, I brain traumatic injury. I have a borderline personality disorder. I have a bipolar disorder. I'm like, come on now. Come on, you can't. Come on. Because people over the years, since she was in high school, age 16, She's been getting all of these labels. Now she's a grown woman, having own children, and yet she's over the years accumulate all of these diagnoses. And I'm like, I said, look, there's no way you can have all of these things. I say, stop. Why don't you just tell me about you? What is unique? What is it about special about you? What is it that you are celebrating about you? I don't want to know. I don't want to know about all of these other things. These are things you know about. Let's talk about that other, the lady you see in the mirror. When you go to your mirror, what do you see? A borderline lady, a bipolar person? Who do you see? And of course, at that point, she's begun to tell me what she used to be. She used to do this and she used to do this. And what has happened? These things are still there. You are nothing more than the memories that you choose to focus on. That's all it is. It's all in the brain. And so you can choose to replay some tapes that you want to replay, or you can choose to replay these other tapes that professionals have told you. And the interesting thing, people pay us to tell us how bad they are when they already know. I said, the reason you come here is because you're not feeling good and all that. You come here not to tell that, for me to tell you what you already know. You're wasting your time. Let's talk about what you can be. Let's talk about who you are. Let's talk about the fact that you are created in the image of God. Let's talk about the fact that you are special and that you're unique, that you're a great mom, that you are all these wonderful things. Let's talk about that. And I think if we can begin to focus on those things, then you may be on the path for transformation and the path for recovery. But again, we like to focus more on the bad side of things rather than the good side of things. So obsessive compulsive disorder, that's all it is. Replaying all the things you don't want to be and all the things that you don't like and just keep replaying it all day. And it's crippling, because once you start replaying those things, you become so sad, then you have to take up a drink. Then you have to take up cocaine. Because the alcohol, see, there's once upon a time the alcohol by the time the alcohol start working, you got to get up and go to the bathroom too much. Okay, so because and I said that to one patient, they just laughed. I said, but yeah, it's true, because with the alcohol, you realize that you have to get up and go to the bathroom too much, right? But with the cocaine, you get there faster. You don't have to go to the bathroom. The heroin, and so that's why you're doing it. That's all it is. So you've got to begin to understand. It doesn't matter what the substitute is. It doesn't matter what you're using. Of course, that person do have a marijuana card, Yeah. So I said, well, if you have the marijuana card, why do you need all these other stuff? Because the marijuana can only hit so much, but the heroin can get you so much higher, and the cocaine can get you so much higher. But the point is, you go up, you got to come down. So let's talk about something else. Let's focus on what is it that you want to be? What is it that God has done for you? What is it that God wants to do for you? And then, of course, some of the other kinds of illnesses, I think that there's also a problem. It's having an impact on our educational system, is the conduct disorder that we see in children. And that conduct disorders, if they're not really treated early, especially in the middle school, in the elementary school, as a matter of fact, and is taken care of, and begin to divert and reverse that in our children, eventually we call it, when they get older, instead of saying conduct disorder, we call them sociopath. We call them antisocials. These are people with no conscience, because eventually it's going to escalate. And what I'm saying is, we need to understand that we can halt some of these psychiatric situations if we start out early, which means we're going to have to allocate more monies into those areas, more monies into our educational systems, more social workers, more psychologists in our school systems, and more parenting skills classes, mentoring of parents to be able to help these antisocial conduct disorder that we see within our elementary kids, so that eventually you can begin to treat it early so that it doesn't escalate to the point where they become sociopaths. And of course, I think the new They know DSM. I think they don't use it. They don't use sociopath anymore. They have another more fancy word, antisocial. Basic. Anyway, we try to minimize the impact of everything by dressing it up. But at the end of the day, no matter how you dress it up, what you're saying is that the person doesn't have any conscience. And if you have no conscience, there could be no sympathy, there could be no empathy. And so not only is this person going to rob you and take your purse and run, they're not going to run anymore. They're going to take your purse and then they're going to shoot you in the head, and then they're going to enjoy watching your brain falling on the ground and take photos of it and keep doing it because it excites them. It's euphoric to watch a person die taking their last breath. Those kinds of persons are being nurtured in homes. They start early. You don't just become as an adult. They're being nurtured as children. And so what I'm saying to us is, I'm saying this to our religious leaders, to our community leaders, to our politicians. We need to begin to look at what's our priority? What are our resources? And we need to begin to allocate some of our financial resources into these areas. And what I'm saying into these areas, the priorities, I think, ought to be in our elementary school system at that age, not in the high school. Because at the high school, it's kind of a little gone, too far gone. I think it was Freud who said that the first 6 years of a child's life is when their character is shaped and formed. Of course, there are others who even drop it a little lower than that. And we now know from a neurological standpoint that the brain continues to develop to about age 24. So we know that the brain is still developing. And if it is still developing, it means that we can tweak it so that people can become more successful. Not just successful in terms of math and science and in those areas, but they can also become more successful in terms of being good citizens, in terms of their character, sense of integrity, respect for self, and respect for others. Those things can be nurtured. And I think that the earlier we start, we'll be more successful if we can start out, early in kindergarten, as a matter of fact. But again, we have to begin to reallocate our priorities in terms of how we spend our tax dollars and what's really important, and be able to allocate that. And I think that's where, again, I'm saying the challenge is not just to the politicians, but the challenge is also to the Christian communities, because they are the broker. They claim that they are the brokers for the transformation of life. And that's where I think you can't wait for the first grader to come to you. You need to go to the first grader. You can't wait for the kindergarten to come to you. You got to go to the kindergarten and be able to nurture that and be able to. One of the interesting thing about Jesus, he said he grew in wisdom, stature, but that was because Jesus had two communities. Well, actually 3 communities, but I'm going to ignore one. And one community that he had was a Mary and a Joseph. And these were wonderful people. But he also had a religious community that he went and he read publicly. As a matter of fact, by age 11, he was reading publicly and had more knowledge of what he was reading than the average person, the adult out there. So Jesus had a head start. And the head start was, I don't know, you're thinking because he was God, right? I wasn't even thinking that. I'm thinking that Jesus had a head start because he had a Mary and he had a Joseph in his life that nurtured him. And not only did he have a Mary and a Joseph, but he had a community, a religious community that he was socialized in. And so those 2 communities help him to be a giant, help him to be the kind of person that he needed to be. Of course, there was the God side to that, when he came to John and he submit himself to publicly acknowledging what his faith was, what his conviction was. And as you recall, after that, he went into the wilderness and he spent 40 days and 40 nights there fasting, preparing for ministry. But what I'm saying to you, the ministry that he was prepared for started out from kindergarten, started out with a Mary and started out with a Joseph, mom and dad, who nurtured him. As a matter of fact, the angel had told them that they had something great. And so they nurtured him. And that's where I think we're hoping that our mom and dad, I was speaking to someone just recently, and they were telling me that they never really had, they see people, they see kids, and he was talking about his own kid, how his own kid, he's with his kid on the football field, and how he's there spending quality time with his kids. And then he said, you know what? I don't remember my parents ever went to one of my football games, and I was good. I was awesome as a football player, but I never remember one of my parents ever was in the stand, cheering for me. And so there are many children, many adults who can identify with that. Never had a father to take them fishing, never had a mother to give them a kiss and hug them and put them in bed, put their blanket over, make sure that they were sleeping okay. Never had a mother who came in and turned the light and tiptoe out, not to wake them. They never had those experiences. There's so many that has never had those experiences. And so there's a lot of built up shame and anger in those people. And so whenever you give them a badge and you give them a uniform and you go out there, that rage and that anger is still there. It wouldn't take much for you to set them off. And God help you when you set them off. And it's not that they're wrong in the term that, sometimes it's us who are wrong. Sometimes it is us who are behaving badly. And when we behave badly and you run into one of these kind of person who have enough rage and anger in them to give, well, you're going to get the full blast. You may not like it, but you're going to get it. You may either get a gun or you may get, the box or the slap or what. You're going to get something, okay? But either way, what I'm saying is, I heard someone say many years ago, we need a gentler society. Jesus has been saying that all the time. Jesus said, look, I come so that you can have a gentler society. I come so that you can have peace. I come so that you can learn how to forgive and how you can learn how to honor and how to respect each other. As a matter of fact, in John 13, verse 34 and verse 5, he says, the commandment is that I want you to love one another as I have loved you, so that the world would know that you are my disciple. You are truly my followers. If you can only learn to love each other as I have loved you, if you can only learn to forgive each other as I have forgive you, if you can only learn to be kind to one another as I am kind to you, if you can only learn how to go the extra mile with people as I have gone the extra mile with you, that's what the society ought to be about. That ought to be the marker, the goal to which we all should be aspiring. And that's where we need to spend our tax monies. That's where we need to make it our priorities in terms of helping our children so that we can have a better future. We may not be successful in our time, but I wonder what your grandchildren would be. Would your grandchild be like you, or your grandchild would be a little better because you've made the sacrifice to make sure that they're better? Not in the sense of just having purely a secular education, but rather in terms of their character, where they can be a responsible adult, a good citizen, where they can make meaningful contribution in terms of, helping to be kind and to be gentle and to respect themselves, respect others, and to respect property. But again, mental illness undermines all of this. And that is why we ought to make it a priority. So at the bottom of the list that I mentioned is this antisocial behavior, this sociopath. And one of my argument tonight is you don't get to become a sociopath unless there's a graduation, there's a hierarchy of all of this. And it starts out in the middle school. It starts out, as a matter of fact, it starts out in the kindergarten. When a little child learn early the way to hit back is to bite his peer, bite everybody, blood, all of that are symptomatic that there's something inherently wrong. I always tell this story. I'll never forget it. I learned this. Witnesses, it was in the elementary school where I was one of the counselors in the elementary school. And a little boy walked in mid of class and asked this teacher, blonde lady, walked in and asked her to bend over, lift her dress. And because what he had saw that night before, he saw his mother and her boyfriend doing their thing. And he came to school the next day. So I called. So, of course, they assigned me to do the call. Of course, I'm going to call. So I call. And the mother's telling me, where does he get this from? So I jokingly, and it was a mistake on my part, I said maybe it's a club that he was in last night. Of course, she called and reported me because I said, her 5-year-old was in the club. I was just trying to say to her, where do you think he got it? He got it because the kid had already told us what you seen it. He had witnessed the mom doing that with her boyfriend. And now he comes to school, not understanding the full ramification of that, and begin to ask the teacher to bend over and pull her dress up. I mean, and of course for us, we were like in the staff room when we were sharing, we were all laughing. It was like fun, but really it wasn't fun. It was talking about what's happening to our children, how scarred they are, how vulnerable they are, and how we create these psychopaths in our society, how we create these people who are predators on us, how we create parasites, how we create sociopaths, how we create criminals by our examples, what we choose to overlook, what we choose to laugh at in terms of our children. All I'm saying to us is we need to begin to take mental illness more seriously than we think it is. It is pervasive and it is widespread and it is having a tremendous impact on all levels of our society. I mean, what Putin is doing, bombing those villages, what Hitler has done, and what many have done with slavery and all over throughout our history. And yet we still haven't come to full grips with what's going on in our society. And so tonight, we didn't have much discussions, but I want to thank Stephanie for being here tonight and for Juliet for being here tonight and many of you who are on the program. But again, this is an interactive program and we certainly have come to the,
it's 3 minutes after 10 actually.
I was trying to figure out whether or not we were just getting close to 10 o'clock. United 9 o'clock in the US, but 10 o'clock there in St. Vincent. But I noticed we've gone over 3 minutes. And so Kamal has been very graceful by not saying anything to me, but I really want to thank him and thank all of you who've been a part of the program tonight. And certainly we'll try to continue some of this discussion because I believe that the topic tonight is very relevant. And so we can get more deeply involved into all of this. We must be, someone says we must be careful of what we do in front of our children. And that is so true tonight, Stephanie. It's a wonderful observation and a comment that we need to take seriously. So again, God bless and stay safe. And thank you, Kamal, for your patience and for all of you who tuned in to be with the program tonight. God bless. Take you all. See you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claudius Davis, and thanks for sharing those excellent advice. You will listen to the Full and Abundant Life radio program. Comes your way each and every Wednesday from 9 until 10 with Dr. Claudius Davis. Join us next Wednesday at 9 for another edition of the Full and Abundant Life radio program right here on We FM. Well, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's